Welcome to Behind the Black Belt, a podcast about the people and black belts of BJJ.
Here we go. Welcome to Behind the Black Belt. I'm your host, Rich, and my guest today is BJJ black belt, Travis Faure. Now, Travis is the owner and head coach out of Redback BJJ in Canberra, Australia. He is a lifetime martial artist, also having a 4th degree black belt in Hapkido and a 3rd degree black belt in karate. He's also been instructing and teaching various forms of unarmed combat and self-defense within the Australian Defence Force for well over 20 years. And in 2019, Travis was inducted into the Australasian Martial Arts Hall of Fame. Travis Faure, welcome to Behind the Black Belt, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Richie, thank you, and thank you for having me. And what a great concept! And I think this show is going to be terrific.
Great, it's so good to have you here. I must warn listeners that Trav is not live from Japan. That's just that's its virtual background. But no, I'm really looking forward to this show. Really picking your brain about everything. You know, as a lifetime martial artist, I cannot wait. So we got a lifetime to cover, Trav. Let's get started. Why don't you kick us off with where were you born and where were you raised?
Okay, Richie. Look, originally, my parents, my father was a policeman. My mother was a nurse. They met in Melbourne. So I was born in Melbourne, but they moved to the country, to Horsham. And I spent probably from 0 to 12, 13 years of age in Horsham, a rural city in regional Victoria. Yeah. And really just doing all the regional sports stuff, such as footy in summer, in winter, tennis and cricket in summer. No exposure to martial arts at this stage. Just enjoying probably my primary school years and riding my bike around and just having, free reign of the place. Horsham being, 10,000 people at the time, being quite a safe environment to grow up in.
Yeah. Is it like were you like grew up on a kind of farming sort of area or?
Yes. Look, my parents were slightly out of town, but it's really in town now. And they had about 2 acres, and we had horses, a swimming pool, and a whole lot of sort of outdoor things. So I had a motorbike as well, and I had access to a reserve where actually they still delivered milk by dairy horse and cart. So they had the draft horses right next door in this paddock, and I used to ride my motorbike around there, and then that night the horses be saddled up and in the cart, and they'd go and deliver the milk. And that I think it was one of the last towns to actually have that service. It was still on until the late 70s. So
wow. That's really cool. I mean, there's some listeners out there who won't. I was joking with someone the other day. Don't remember a 3.5-inch floppy disk, let alone milk being delivered by horse-drawn cart. That's quite incredible.
And that's as far back as I'm going. 60s child, growing up in the 70s in rural Victoria.
That's fantastic.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, what was the school like? Was it a big school?
Oh, look, Horsham 298 was a primary school. In fact, my future wife actually went there, Liz.
There you go.
Not at the time, but she was a little bit younger. She was there, probably had a crossover. I was probably in year 6 and she was probably in grade 2 or something. But But yeah, look, I have fond memories of my schooling. Actually, it was, just rural cities, rural country people, support each other, and you knew everyone, and you knew all your neighbours. The neighbours knew you. You really couldn't get away with much. I remember one story, because my dad was the local policeman. As kids, we're not always perfect, but I did a little shoplift of fruit tingles, a little packet of fruit tingles, and this was just a shop over the road, so it's a little bit silly. And the owner was like, she caught me because I must have been pretty obvious. Yeah. And she goes, right, I know who your dad is. I'm like, oh, don't tell my dad. She never did, but I learned a lesson just by getting told off by her. And but how silly, like the shop exactly across the road from me, and here I am trying to flock something from them.
The criminal mastermind, Travis Faure. There you go.
I was taught too. Yeah.
That's great. And so your dad was a local copper. What's it like growing up with a dad that's a policeman?
Well, that's quite interesting because say in Horsham, if he wasn't particularly popular, you'd probably cop it a little bit.
Yeah.
But my dad, he was 6'7". He was at the time the tallest policeman in Victoria.
Wow.
And so people didn't really mix with him. Yet he had he had a sort of rough exterior, a bit gruff and a bit, he could get angry. But really inside, he was probably really a marshmallow, to be honest.
Yeah.
And he didn't like weapons, so he never really carried a weapon. He really didn't know how to fight, but no one really fought him because he was a bit of a mountain. But at the time in primary school, my mother was like, if we send you to this high school, they don't like policemen's sons and blah, blah, blah. And so I thought I was either going to the tech and doing the trade sort of thing or the high school before my mates. But actually I ended up being sent to boarding school in Hamilton, which is just down the road in the Western Districts, and to a missionary Sacred Heart School, Catholic boarding school at the time, called Monterey College. And I guess it was there that I was exposed to martial arts. So that's why I'm sort of pulling this in a bit. So I was boarding for 6 years, from Form 1 to Form 6. And boarding schools have their own cultures, so a bit like probably a prison, or unless you have experienced it, or even the military has a culture. Obviously, boarding schools have a culture, and it really was. If you were the biggest, and if you were the oldest, or you had something, you could dominate over others. Well, when you're in Form 1, you're at the lowest end of the pecking order. So so in a boarding school back then, it's changed a lot. Like, it had to change, but they still gave out the cane. The priests were still ruling by the cane, and so they'd give out the food, and on my table we all had a dedicated table, and I had Naruans. Now, Naruans are particularly big and strong, and so we had the older Naruans on the table, and there was little Damien Hassett and myself, and we were Form 1. Well, we got the scraps of the food. They divide the ice cream, and they divide it in half, and the biggest Naruan took half, and then everyone else had to fight over a little crumb.
Yeah.
I was a little bit bigger than Damien, so I actually got a bit more than Damien, which was, when I look back, Damien passed away by suicide 2 years ago, and I don't say that was the start of it back then, but I think those psychological sort of impacts that a boarding school can have may affect people throughout their life. But for me, it was just, I had to get tough. I had to be tougher. And so I developed a thing about like bullies. I don't like bullies. I don't like, and so we had bullies on. I didn't know at the time. Well, they sort of got their own way, but looking back, they were bullies. They were the school bullies. In fact, they like to fight, those guys, not just those guys, but other guys. And one of them in particular, we had this crappy old weight room and rusty weights, and he came in and he goes, "Oh, right, I can lift the Commonwealth record." And we're all like, "Yeah, right." So we racked this thing with all the weights, and even had people sitting on top to get to the weight. Right, this rusty thing on a bench that would probably collapse. And he gets out there and he goes, "Ugh!" And he lifts the Commonwealth record. Right?
Oh my God!
We go upstairs to the sports master and say, "Hey, look, so and so's done this." And they're like, "No way." And they ring Melbourne, and eventually, cut a long story short, he goes to Melbourne, and they lift it correctly, and he lifts his Commonwealth record.
Wow!
But he was one of the main bullies that I didn't like. Line up for showers, and he would go to the front of the line. I'm the biggest guy here, you guys, and he would just push the line back, and he would let all the other people in that he liked.
Yeah.
One day I decided, nah, you're not going to like, I'm in year 9 at this stage. You're not going to let these others in who are younger than me. That's just not on. I've lined up. They're not getting in. So I've walked up to him and started to have a go at him, probably quite emotional. Year 9, what they're like at 15, very emotional. "Hey, you're not doing the right thing." He just pushed me about 10 meters. I slipped over, hit my head on the wall. It was in an old boarding school. The showers are in a basement, and so freezing cold, and everyone just looked at me like, "Yeah, good try." But it was really interesting because from that day on, I sort of stood up to him a bit, and I think he appreciated it. Well, he didn't. I certainly kind of didn't appreciate it at the time, but there was this thing, and I sort of went, "You know what? That's cool. I can take a hit, if I'm going to have, you know, if I'm going to stand there and stand my ground, I'll take the hit, you know. And
yeah.
so that was a bit of a lesson.
There you go.
Yeah,
There's something about boarding school. I went to boarding school for a couple of years as well. And,
yeah,
you know, you have to quickly find your sense of independence, and you need to quickly find out, you know, who you are. It's a very steep learning curve when you're out of the nest and into, you know, mine was an all boys boarding school, which yours sounds like the same as well. It's it's like a war zone. You know, you got to quickly learn how to survive.
Well, ours was co-ed, so we got the females in, and yeah, so it was co-ed from about year 10 onwards, but up until then it wasn't. But the school had a fantastic martial arts program.
Yeah, okay.
So the teacher, Terry Walsh, who's passed away, he was like the disciplinary master too. He was scary, man. He tough as nails, never married, had 40 years at the school, English teacher, caned you. One day we were in study and we were doing letter writing. I don't know if people do this these days, but we had an hour of letter writing on Sundays. And so we're all in there and you're not allowed to talk. And you've got to look, this was Form 2 actually. Form 1, I've never done any study. I didn't even read a book in primary school. My parents, I just didn't. I was outside. Yeah. So for me to have to do 3 hours of study, 2 hours of study a night, I'm like, what am I going to do? And you know, got shown, read a book. Anyway, cut a long story short, we're in there and some people are talking. Terry sees us, walks in and goes, right, own up, who's talking? And we're all scared. I wasn't talking. So I'm like, well, I wasn't talking. I'm not putting my hand up. People put their hand up. Not enough people put their hand up. Terry walks out and says, I'll give you a few more minutes. He walks back in. Who's talking? Same people put their hand up. Not enough people. He goes, right, everyone else who wasn't talking, stand up. That was me. I'm a bit annoyed now because I know what's coming. He said, right, he lined us all up and gave us 2 each of the cane.
Wow.
And I was furious because I wasn't talking, you know?
Yeah.
The funny thing was Terry White. Now, Terry White, who's a little guy, because we were watching him. So he started at the sort of front of the line. Terry Walsh is doing the cane on this end. And Terry White's sneaking under the tables, and there's a crossover point. He gets away with it. So even though we all got caned, we were really happy for Terry White because he got away with it. You know, so you can be upset, you can be indignant, you can be, you know, emotional about it, but you know what? Terry White got away with it, and I think
that's so good.
But he ran judo, and he was old school. And I'm not saying he was highly ranked in judo. He was probably a brown belt. And he taught us basic hip escapes, basic throwing and rolling and wrestling, and kind of toughened you up for boarding school. And that was 2 days a week. And then on another 2 days, we had this guy called John McIntosh, who still teaches in Hamilton. He's been teaching since 1968. So he started when he was born. He was a phenomenal karate guy, like local hero, you know, like people in the wider community, there's a lot that do know of him, but he's been in Hamilton for years just teaching Shotokan karate. So we had that twice a week. So between the two of them, you got this sort of karate and judo, and the school also had cadets. So you could stream into a specialist area. And initially I was in the band, and the band would have to play, and I never practiced. I was on the cornet, I think. Anyway, the thing that goes like that. So when they had their cadet parades, I used to pretend that I was playing, and and sometimes I would just play. And it was a bit like The Simpsons when Lisa, she just goes off on her own, except her tunes make sense. Mine, just got carried away. Anyway, I was specialised into the self-defence aspect, so we mixed punching and striking and judo throws, and it was pretty cool, like a primitive self-defense program for cadets back in the early 80s. So that was
okay.
It was run. The other thing that was special about Terry Walsh as a person was he believed in, I'm not going to run the program. I'm going to make you guys run the program. So we ran the karate school. We ran the judo, and he was there sort of as a mentor and guide. And I was teaching martial arts at 14 and 15. Now, I'm not saying it was particularly good, but when you add that to years of doing it, that's a long time to, I'm now, I know I'm 35, but I'm 52. And that's a long time. So I've been doing it a lot. And I saw he was, you know, he was well ahead of his time. And I saw a program where people had mentorship. And I thought, you know what, in the future, if I ever run anything, that's the way to do it. Bring young guys on, girls, and bring them up and let them, you know, let them reach their potential and guide them along the way. You know, they're going to make mistakes, but you can have a real impression on them. And yeah, so it was just a phenomenal time. And so my life, I look at it and it's kind of been about fantastic role models. And sure, I've had ones that haven't been as good, but that started, my very first impressions of martial arts started with two fantastic people, Terry Walsh and John McIntosh. And I think if it had been, because, you know, instructors have a responsibility, and if we're not the best role model, then that very first person that comes in, it's their first lesson. If we don't do the right, if we don't, you know, make it exciting, make it fun, make it all the things that they want, then you probably lose that person for life. So
yeah, no, that's a cool upbringing, a cool story. You mentioned, Travis, that you played some sort of country sports growing up as well.
Yes.
And then introduced to martial arts when you were at boarding school. Did you continue the other sports, or were you just all in for the martial arts?
It's interesting because my father was picked to play for North Melbourne and St Kilda. He's tall, 6'7", you know, he was a ruck. And so he went to Melbourne, and he was sort of a Portland, Melbourne guy. I think he enjoyed the nightlife and didn't train as much as he should have, so he was dropped. But in rural country town Horsham, he played in a number of their premierships, like he was in the '68 premiership. I still remember that. That was actually the year that I was born. And so he thought that I would be a football guy, and he actually had some misgivings about karate, the Japanese thing, and about doing this. And so I still mixed football till year 11. But once I got the feeling for martial arts and what I felt like when I was doing it, I kind of dropped the football away. But I came back to it. I played it for about 3 years when I was in the military, and copped a few injuries too from it. But I was a ruck, and we got to the grand final, the School of Armour, and a few things like that. So I was kind of mixing the two. And I loved tennis. My mother was a tennis player. So she would take us down to the tennis courts, and even not back too long ago, we were still doing that sort of stuff. And yes, and we played cricket at school as well.
Yeah.
So the karate program, the martial arts program at the school was looked at like, oh, because it was new. Terry Walsh had started it in the 70s and it died out. And then he kicked it off again in the 80s. And he had there was a year above me. And there were some gentlemen there, Michael Gregory, Bernie Kelly, and a few of these guys. And they ran it, and then they handed it on to the next generation, and we ran it, and then we handed it on. And it went for a number of years, about 10 years after we left the school. And then and then actually insurances, the school came up with, oh, well, you need to pay insurances and this and that. And it was always done on the cheap. So so John went to a different hall. So yeah.
Yeah. Active, man. Such an active sort of young teenager. And you know, were you academically good at school?
I'd like to say I was just brilliant, but that's not. So I went from primary school not doing any study, right, to a school where they made you do 2 hours at night. And if you were bad, like a naughty boy, you did an extra hour. So it was 3 hours. And then on weekends, you did some on Sunday. Sunday night was study as well. So I was always looking for excuses to get out of study. And even though I was a study head in the end, and I won lots of prizes for diligence, I always wanted the prize for the academic award, but I never got that. I was way down on the list. But my perseverance and persistence, I always got things for that. That was recognised.
Yeah.
But I found things to get out. So there was a swimming club. I was into the swimming. And that was training in the morning. So yeah. Training in a cold pool in the mornings, that was
terrible.
But
terrible.
Yeah, so no, I wouldn't say I was that academic. Obviously, I passed subjects, and I remember my year 11 report from Father Ewer, and he said of average ability, getting average. It was all about being average, of achieving average marks. And then I was thinking about that. I was a bit offended. Year 11, probably 16, 17 at the time. And then I was thinking, but you know what? Average, that's the bell curve. You're in the middle, you know, like that's okay. Obviously, it's not, we're not exceptional, you know, but you've got to find the things that you need to do. And maybe that study wasn't for me, but I've become a student. I've learned so much more from Monterey about how to be, but it set me up. I realized, and you know, even with my own children now, I'm like, hey, you've got to do this, do the hardest subject first, because it was drummed into me. You do your maths, your science, then your English, and then you read a book. But, you know, not my children straight out with the device. I'm like, no, the device, that's afterwards. That's a reward, you know, but yeah.
And as you're going through high school, what were your sort of aspirations? What did you want to be when you finished school?
I know. Look, I really enjoyed high school. I thought, you know, I actually wanted to do some sort of martial arts thing, but at the same time, there was a reality too.
Yeah.
I probably really didn't know. And it evolved. And I finished year 12. I got into science at La Trobe Uni and thought, oh, that's not too bad. I thought about being a school teacher. I went to a couple of the colleges and had an interview, and I thought, you know, maybe I'll be a school teacher. Like, that looks like a pretty good job. And then I got into science and at La Trobe, so that's where I sort of headed off to. But even then, it was like, I don't know if I was going to be a scientist wearing a white lab coat. And so even at the completion of that, I was kind of like, well, I don't know if I want to look down a microscope. And so I did a dip ed, and then I thought, well, maybe I'll be a secondary teacher, you know, and do that path. But then they came in, this is 90, and they came in and said, look, there's no jobs. And I'm like, I've just done this study. I need a job. I'm sick of being a poor uni student. And so that's when I joined the military. But look, so to answer your question, I wasn't, look, some friends of mine, I'm going to be a chiropractor, you know, and I'm going to be retired by 40. And that guy achieved that, you know, he's a chiropractor retired by 40. And I'm like, I should have set a goal like that. I'm going to be a dentist and I'll be retired by 26, you know, like, but I never had that. I kind of just went, okay, I've got into this, I'll go and do that and see where that takes me, you know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of been a bit of my life, really, a little bit. I mean, obviously, a bit of time in the military, but other than that, you kind of do what it hasn't been planned, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe I planned a little bit, but I've certainly let it take its time, just go where it needs to go, sort of thing.
And at that age, what were your inspirations? Like, were there movies? Was there?
Literally just cut out.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you just repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So at that age, what inspired you? Who inspired you? What inspirations were around you?
All right. So this is like 16, 17, around that age?
Yeah.
Look, obviously in a boarding school, the older students kind of, you know, you look up to them. You know, even some of the instructors who taught the martial arts programs, they inspired me. And as far as like external role models, like I know people like to say, oh, I got into martial arts because of the Bruce Lee craze or the UFC. I sort of, that was all around, and I looked at it in the Kung Fu magazines and all the rest of it, but I just like to do my thing. I just like to train. I was inspired by some people, and I was later on in life, I could identify, you know, that guy's good because I can see where they're going with that. But back then it was probably the teachers and other people, you know, other students, particularly in a boarding school environment. But
that makes sense, because boarding school, it's a very insular environment. You don't have many outside contacts. That's why I was curious about what inspired you. You know, because I'd assume you kind of did the martial arts not only because it was attractive, but there wasn't much else to do. You know what I mean? So you kind of do that. Yeah. That's fascinating. All right, so you finish high school. Yes. You head off to uni at La Trobe, and are you doing martial arts still?
Well, I'll tell you what happens. I go to La Trobe Uni, and there's Glen College, which is a accommodation college, and they actually offer food. And my parents were like, I think you should go there, then you don't have to cook too much. And so I've gone in there, and just so happened to happen that about 3 others from my year that did martial arts were at Glen College, and we're all good friends. But I didn't know they were even going to La Trobe, and I didn't even know they were. It was funny when you look back and you go, "What? You weren't talking to them?" But we didn't have the internet, we didn't have email. Had a phone, but I'd just gone on holidays, and I was working at the pub in Meechung. So I wasn't thinking, and then I got the offer to go to uni. I wasn't thinking, oh, I'll find out from those guys, but and then we get down there, I'm like, oh my God, you guys are here. And straight away, we're doing study. One of them in particular, Bernie Kelly, who's a very good friend, and he was very diligent, and actually achieved some really good results, but in his studies. So I kind of, we just fell into this pattern, and we'd go and train 2 or 3 times a week, karate at a place in Coburg, a guy by the name of John Hapkido, and that was a Greek community.
Yeah, we
were the skips, and we were reminded that we were the skips. So we go in there, and first up they say to us, like, I'm kind of tall. My hair's darker now, but it was a bit blonder.
Yeah,
and Bernie's got dark, sort of brown, black hair, shorter than me, and they're like, oh, you two look the same. Like, we're getting this reverse racism sort of thing from these.
Yeah.
And so they're all Greek, and so the karate was done with a Greek accent. And so when even years later, when I teach a bit of karate, I'll use a word that's Japanese, but with a Greek accent, and people go, what are you saying there? But it was look, that was community-based, community halls, and John Hapkido ran probably 5 nights a week, and he was a very accomplished martial artist. He's like the president of the Victorian AKF, and he's a kata person. He was very good at kata, and he was very good at sparring when he was younger, and I think he was fairly aggressive, and I think he had to be, and he didn't mind a fight, to be honest, because he was a Greek. They used to call them new Australians back then, and he's come to Australia, and he obviously had to stand up for himself in school, him and his brother. So they did karate, and they had a few fights. So we've rocked up to that school, and they're totally all Greek, like seriously, yeah. And they're like, what are you guys doing? We're like, we're here to train. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, we'll train. And we trained there for about 4 years, and had some funny stories with these guys, because his wife, Mary, she was a fantastic cook, and I was known for eating. So that was a really good combination. If he invited us around to his place, I'd go around and pig out on Greek food, and I love Greek food. And so that was pretty good. But he had, I didn't realize that the Turkish and the Greeks not necessarily got along. Yeah. And so there's a mall in school now. They still might be around. So, and if, like, this is 30 years ago, but I remember saying, we used to always have these competitions, intra-school competitions as well as state competitions, because we were competing a lot. And I remember going, gosh, they're the same style as us. They're even kind of under John. But when we go against them, it's war. And the Greek, this guy, Sam, Savas, he goes, yeah, you can't let them win. They're not allowed to win, Travis. So we had to beat these guys that were just down the road, that were part of our organisation. Oh, but don't worry about, the other schools. No, don't worry about those guys.
These guys. They're the bad guys.
You have to beat. So that was kind of funny. And, but, like Bernard and I, we were just like, oh, yeah, whatever. But, because it was just a funny sort of thing. But yeah.
Yeah. And then how do you find yourself then in the army?
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Well, look, basically completed the dip ed. They've told us there are no jobs. I'm like, I haven't just done 4 years of study to have no job. And I don't really know if I'm going to look down a microscope. So I thought, because I was doing, in the end, I majored in microbiology, and I thought, right, that day, the day they said there's no jobs, filled out the application form for RMC. Said, no, I'm punching out. Jumped through the RMC application process and was accepted for the January intake the following year.
Yeah, and to do officer training in the army.
Yeah, at the Royal Military College. Yeah.
Yeah, great. And was that quite a, because you had a bit of life experience at that stage. You've been out uni, living on your own. What was it like then going into the army at that age?
Yeah, so I was 22, and obviously there were younger guys, but there were also the guys that had done uni as well. And you get the guys coming over the hill from ADFA, so they've got degrees as well. So I wasn't, older, really. I was probably similar age to a lot of them. And, people struggled a little bit with the first few weeks of Royal Military College, but I didn't. It was just boarding school, and it was just basically getting paid. They grilled you and they tortured you, but I'd had that done at boarding school. So I was like, gee, bring it on, please.
Yeah.
So I survived, I'm not going to say shine in that sort of environment, but that's nothing for me to just put up with a bit of pain and a little bit of, these days you'd probably call it bastardization, but it was just training. And each generation things change and we make improvements, and this is the 90s, so it's probably changed a bit since I've been there as well. So
sure.
So I didn't really have to adjust too much.
And then you do your officer training, and then where does the Army send you to?
Right. Well, this is an interesting point. So I actually do the officer training. I go to Armoured Corps. And
okay.
Yeah. I keep this quiet. And
so Armoured Corps, for those listeners, is the tanks, the armored vehicles, stuff like that.
Now, Armoured Corps it's a great corps, and you got to be suited to it. And I virtually did the ROBC, and I got to virtually the last week, and I realised this is not for me.
Wow.
And I've just played in their side that we didn't win the premiership, and the main for DS, the main senior instructor's like, you can't leave. I've got your football. I've got your career planned out with your football. Like you're going to go to First Armoured and you're going to be in their football team. And I'm like, oh, right. But he didn't realise. So what happened was I just didn't feel comfortable in the turret. You had a pistol on you and it had a loop thing over you, and it would often get caught on things. So when I traversed the turret, it would strangle me, or I'd leave a limb out and it would get caught. And I would just... I was a bit of a klutz, to be honest. Anyway, we're driving along on the live fire, and my tank has a UD. Just boom! It just blows. It just fires this round. I'm like, where the hell did that go? I'm just like, oh my God. It just missed the other tank and just nearly hit a tree, and it was just like horrible. And they're like, you hit the trigger. And there was an investigation. I said, I didn't touch the bloody trigger. Because you had the master controller down here. And but also the gunner below your feet. He has a controller as well. And that was a fellow friend, Bruce Baldwin. And I was going, Bruce! Well, the DS reaches down, because they used to ride in the back of the tank in a little, like a nest. And he just reaches down and pulls, and he was short. Sergeant Ludeman, he just grabs me, pulls me out like I'm like a long piece of bean, like I'm just a long, tall, skinny thing. And then grabs Bruce, takes us behind the shed, because it scared the living crap out of him as well. Yeah. He's like getting into us, and I'm like, I didn't touch it. Bruce is like, I didn't touch it. Anyway, they wanted to charge us, obviously. Yeah. They had to, but they go back they take it back into the shed, and I said, well, to be fair, they've got to check it. And they realised that, and they check it, and there was a fault with the firing switch. So as soon as it was loaded, it didn't take much to fire the thing.
So like a bump or something like that.
Yeah, and so Ludeman had it.
Oh my goodness.
This guy is not going to make it through. So he rode me pretty hard. And every time I thought, oh, I've really failed this, I would just let go. And it's an amazing thing. I just, like, you had to do some runs, and he's like, he kind of did ride me, but he's like, you're out of here. You make a mistake, you're gone. And I'm like, oh, well, if I'm gone, I may as well have some fun.
Yeah.
And I literally, these tank runs where you go down and fire your machine gun, fire off a few rounds, and it was a lot of fun. I just had a ball. And then at the end of the day, I still remember it, the DS, the main instructor goes to Ludeman, because Ludeman just didn't say anything. He walked off. And then the rumour got back to me from the DS that I was one of the better ones, the most aggressive one going through. I actually... Because
you're just embracing it. Just having fun.
I didn't care. I was like, I'm out of here. I may as well have a yippee shoot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I had the tank turret, the traversing left and right, and I hit, you couldn't hit every target, right? Because it was impossible, but I had it, going sideways. I had a lot of fun. But I woke up one morning and realised, you know what? It's probably not for me. And I could have completed. Yeah, it's one of those things. I could have completed it, didn't complete it. I live with it. I made a decision, and I've been happy with it. But yeah, so I said no, and then I had all these people going, "No, you can't leave." But yeah, so I went to Signal Corps, and not quite as aggressive as being an Army Corps, that's for sure. But no, that was, and I did the ROBC in, which is the basic training for Signal Corps. I did it in Melbourne, and then was posted out of there.
Okay. And then you're in the Army now, you're a signals officer, and is martial arts still a part of your life?
It was. So I was posted originally to Brisbane, and actually, first year in one SIG regiment, which is first signal regiment. And I was still doing karate. I went, and this time I went from Greek to Spanish, Alfonso Jimenez. And he still community minded, and he had about 5 children. But what I liked about Alfonso was he was really good technician, and he was a really short little guy, but awesome at kata, and really great human. And so I saw his family and the way he embraced his family, and I thought that's really good. And but you know, they stuck together and they did their training and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, so that was my karate bit, was just training with these guys regularly. And there was a lot of coppers. It was at Inala, I think the suburb in Brisbane. And there's a police training thing there, and we'd get some police coming in and training. And the sparring was, actually, that's right, my very first night there. I rock up, I've got a black belt, and there's a couple of them, John and get the other guy's name, but they're looking at me like, oh, basically they were rubbing their hands going, let's get some sparring happening, because they were like, they wanted to know where the pecking order was, like. And so it was kind of funny, but we were sparring, and that, you know, we were all in our mid-20s. Maybe John was a little bit older, but yeah. And so the pecking order had to be established, and between the three of us, and because we got a few higher dans together, and there was always this. It was always this sort of pecking order with us of you know, who was sort of more senior, or you know, and it was always determined sort of by the sparring. So,
yeah. And how'd you go the first night?
Yeah, well, it was kind of interesting. I think I was probably, because I was like, I don't go. I think I was 3rd out of 3, because I didn't know this was their system. I didn't know that they were putting me on the spot. Then Alfonso, a month or 2 later, goes, yeah, that was a bit rough what they did to you. And he was a decent character. And I think he realised, oh, Trav's not too bad either. So, you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, they certainly were into giving it out, that's for sure. But,
yeah. And then when do you get involved in the teaching of the martial arts within the military?
Yeah, right. Look, so I'm at my first unit, and I read in Army magazine. I look at some grainy photos, and there's this military unarmed combat wing that was in Townsville, led by John Whipp. And I was like, oh, that sounds great, you know. Imagine that, getting paid to train and just in, you know, and do good things. And so I said to the CO at the time, came a general later, Lieutenant Colonel McNahon, and he's like, oh, you're not going to get released for that. How about you organise it down here? It's like, oh, right, okay, I'll try and do that. And yeah, so I got in touch with John, and basically what we did was we jacked up a course for Brisbane, and he came down with his merry men. They were all reserve at this stage, and John he'd done a number of tours of Vietnam, 3 in fact, and the course, so that original course, the military unarmed combat course, probably from the 80s through to that, this was mid-90s, was very much based on escape and evasion. We're behind enemy lines. And so that set the scene for that course. So you didn't have weapons, and you had to use your brain, and you had to be cunning, and you had to, you know, take out sentries and do all sorts of stuff. And when you actually keep in the context of what it was designed for, that kind of made sense. So we designed the course. Well, I didn't design that course. John came down, delivered the course, and it was the only course in the military that I got student of merit.
Hey.
He even wrote on the course. I was nearly going to bring it in today and roll it out here.
Yeah.
Because, they don't give student of merit on those courses. He wrote it. I was just like, yeah. But no, so, and that relationship with John is still present to today. Actually, like all my relationships with all my instructors, I could ring them up and just have a chat. So
yeah,
it's kind of an interest. I think life is about relationships. So if you're burning bridges along the way, that's not gonna. You need more. You have to find more bridges. But if you've got these bridges stacked and racked behind you, you just you can walk back over them. You can catch up with people. It's quite good. But yeah, so that got us. They used to have a class system then, A, B, C. We were all C class, and actually to get through the system, you had to live about 50 years to get to A class. Well, not quite, but it took a long time. And I even as that system went on, I only got to B class. Like I didn't get the A class. Like there was only 6 A class, and there was a bit of we're not going to give out A classes sort of thing going on as well. So anyway, I got to B class with another guy called Shane Cassidy, and But I ran a lot of courses. I really enjoyed the training. It was a pretty tough course. We used to train 2 weeks, and we used to do from 7 in the morning, and then you train all day, and then you do 2 hours at night time. And that 2 hours at night time was sort of this, it was still fairly hard training. But when you look back at it, you go, it was hard training, and it's achievable, but maybe results are far better if it's not as long, like you're tiring people out. Like these days, you got to train sensibly for long term. And so that training was tough, and it was a tough course to do. And it was a badge of honor. I got through the old, the muck course because it was tough.
Yeah. And tell us about John Whipp. He's pretty famous kind of guy.
John's I don't want to get this wrong, John. I think he's a 10th degree judo. I think 9 or 10.
Yeah.
He's well respected in judo.
Yeah.
And he did, like I said, 3 tours of Vietnam. He did a couple of tours as a guard or presidential, not presidential, a general. He was the guard to the general, and he ran the military unarmed combat from basically being qualified. He got qualified under Blue Curran, who's a legend in commandos.
Yeah.
So Warren Blue Curran. So he got qualified in 68, another 68, that's significant.
Wow.
My birth year as well. And then he ran lots of courses up until 2000. And it's quite interesting because obviously military unarmed combat, it's, there was sort of like a number of different camps, and we had like the West Coast had their own guy over there called Major Morks, and Johnny Whipp was on the East Coast doing his stuff as well. So just interesting. But yeah, and then he competed in masters in judo, was a senior ref, was a senior coach. Yeah, he's done a lot of good things for the Australian society.
Yeah. It sounds like a really intense course, like two weeks of 12-hour training plus another 2 hours of a nighttime. That is intense, and because it's quite the opposite of a consistent approach to martial arts that we would see now. 2 sessions a week for a whole bunch of years. Did you find when you were teaching these courses a significant increase in the individuals from the start to the end of the course?
Massively. Look, you could take someone who knew nothing, and by the end of that 2 weeks, they were kicking, punching, elbow striking, falling, throwing. Basically, they had it all down pat. It was, they got to a very good standard because they were tested along the way. And for an individual doing individual stuff, it was like probably 4 months, 5 months of doing training somewhere else. Like you went off to judo and you come back, you go to a bit of karate and you bring it in, or striking, Muay Thai, whatever you're going to do, kickboxing. And it was just that intense period. So yes, so the result, but then the people go back to the units, and do they train, or do they continue it? That's the question.
Yeah. And what about your own personal sort of martial arts at this time? So you're instructing within the army, and what are you doing outside of the army for your own development?
I was still doing karate, and I was competing. So I was training up. So we had in Brisbane, we had the European champion, and he came and trained with us for 6 months. He was actually a PhD student. He was a science student at Queensland University. And so we had him at the school, and we were training hard for competition. He would go in a comp and he would just win it fairly easily. I would train with this guy. I just took the opportunity to train with this guy, and it just improved me. And then there was so we'll just rewind a little bit. There was a world championship in Japan for Shotokan karate, world Shotokan karate, because there's all these splits and everyone's a world champion of something. But so he assisted me train up for one of those. And I went to 2 of those in the military. So one in 93 when I just sort of gone up to Brisbane, and then one in 97. The 93 one was good. I trained really hard with this guy, and it was, we had a lot of fun, and I got through. There was like about 200 competitors to 250, and I got through to the last 8, which was pretty cool. And I remember there was a guy from Melbourne. His name was Sam. He's a big guy, 6 foot, about the same size as my father, 6'6", 6'7". Anyway, Sam's like, we got down to the last 8, and the last 8 we're going to fight the next day. Anyway, we're on the train going back to the motel, and we get invited, because the Japanese were very friendly. They invite us back. This guy, businessman, invites us back to his home to have some beers. I'm saying to Sam, we got to go back. We've got to get early night sleep. We've got to get up in the morning and do well. He's like, no, she'll be right. So we had a few beers at this guy's place, and the next day, Sam makes it through to the top 4, and I was knocked out in the next round. But it was funny because then all our energy was on Sam, making sure he gets through.
Yeah.
Anyway, he had a Turkish competitor he was against, and he had a Turkish referee. And the main man, who was Sensei Kasuya, who's quite famous in Japan and martial arts and Shotokan karate, he steps down from he had this high table, and he came down, he's standing near me, and because I'm a competitor and I just competed, but I got knocked out, I was still there. And so I'm watching, and Sam's not scoring. It's, this is semi-contact, this is skin touch, and I love the way Kasuya always explained it was, you touch, but you don't leave a bruise. Yeah. So you basically hit, right? As long as you didn't cause any blood, sort of thing. So it wasn't non-contact, it was touch. Anyway, so Sam's a big guy, and he's thumping into this guy, and he's doing really well, but he's not scoring. Anyway, Kasuya turns to me and I don't know why he said it. He goes, "Oh, what's going on?" And I was like, "What's going on? Turkish referee, Turkish competitor. There's no way Sam's scoring." I was carrying on. Anyway, John Haititis, who was with us then, he was up from Melbourne, but he was with the team because it was still the same organisation. He's one of their high refs, and he's the Australian. He just turned his back and walked out. He was angry. What happened was, afterwards, when they'd had the fights and we were getting the presentations, to people who came first, whatever, before, Sam ends up getting this special award that Kasuya must have, I don't know, said, "Go and buy an award for him." So
real quick.
It was far bigger than the actual trophies for first place. And so Sam walked away with this sort of nice award, and everyone was happy. So we were training for competitions. And I did a lot. I did a lot of, state. I was on the state team in Victoria and Queensland, and I trained with the 2 different teams. And then I got onto a national team for Shotokan. And so it was still, you're in your mid-20s, you're tall, you're strong, you're fast, so you're doing all your karate.
Yeah.
And that was, I just enjoyed that. So
yeah. And this will fast forward us a bit, but then when does BJJ enter your life?
That fast forwards us about 10 years.
Yeah, I know.
I've still got I'm now 39 and I'm doing BJJ. Come on, man.
I'm not saying get straight there, but
All right. So exposure. I think the military exposes you to a lot of things, right? And you've got this great network. So people are coming in. Some of the instructors are kickboxing, some are judo, some are stick fighting. And, so you're getting exposed. I'm not saying I'm a stick fighter. I'm not saying I'm this, but this massive exposure to stuff. And we always had a ground component. Now, one of the tenets of the old course was never go to ground.
Yeah.
And that was because it was dangerous for you if you had your weapon system. You don't want to be wrestling on the ground, blah, 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 all that. So, but we still did a little bit, but it wasn't Brazilian jiu-jitsu. It was more judo sort of jiu-jitsu. Like it wasn't as freestyle, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, so my exposure to BJJ was I've done some stuff in the military. I've been posted around, and you know that old course, military uncom course, has changed, and now we're doing something else. And I'm actually at a commando unit, and we're doing close quarter fighting, and I'm starting to do Hapkido. And I'm at the same time, I got one seminar, and I don't think it was sold particularly well, but at the time it was about 99 or 2000. A purple belt BJJ guy came in, which at that time was pretty significant. Like, that was with Jeff Booth in Sydney, and this guy came in, and I was like, I probably didn't appreciate at the time that sort of, you know, purple belt is quite senior, really still senior now. But yeah, so he did a lesson. I vaguely remember it was on mount and guard. It was just exposure. That's all it was. And did it grab me? I probably was still more trying to do my Hapkido, trying to do other stuff, but that was the initial exposure to that.
Yeah.
We'd had exposure along the way with the unarmed combat stuff, but nothing formal, nothing sort of going, okay, I want to grip this up, I want to do more of it. So the very first lesson, like, I think I engaged John Will, who's been on your show. He's a legend in BJJ in Australia, one of the very first black belt. He came to ADFA, Australian Defence Force Academy, either 2003, 2004, I think it's 4. And he was engaged to do defensive tactics, and we were looking at a different program, and we were just looking at ground, and we were saying, well, what can we do? John, though, even though he's got all this BJJ experience, he was not interested in teaching us that. He was like, well, stand up, you're going to do this. And it made a lot of sense. And then in the afternoon, there was one segment on BJJ, on the ground. It wasn't BJJ, it was just a bit of ground self-defense, how to get back to your feet and do a few things because you don't really want to be on the ground and all this sort of stuff. And so he massaged this segment in. John has a really good ability at being able to sell something, like not sell as a marketeer, but just when he's totally engaged in the process.
Yeah.
So you do a lesson with John. Now I've always said this, John could make knitting fantastic, and we'd all be doing knitting, and it'd be like, wow, look at this loop, oh my God.
It'd be exciting.
Yeah, exciting. He can make it exciting. He sells it really well because he's so into it himself. So I did that lesson. I'm like, oh my God, that was just awesome. And then we're doing Hapkido at the ADFA, and we were doing it twice a week. And there was BJJ happening over the other side of town, and there was a bit of talk about, you know, we should be doing a bit of that. And eventually, I eventually did a bit of training with Danny Weir, and then Mike Armstrong, and then I sort of got into it that way. So it was a few years where it was just informal. I was experimenting. I like to experiment. I think it's important, but when I say formal, like I hadn't introduced it to my school and gone, you know, we're going to do that. It was just me playing with some stuff, and then eventually going, you know what, we need to grip this up. And what I did, probably a bit different to other people, is I had it from my school only, and we just sort of did it internally. And that happened for a few years, and just wanted to get the skill base up and all the rest of it. And then we did that. Then we sort of opened it out.
For those that don't know about it, Travis, talk to us about Hapkido, because you don't come across many traditional martial arts that is willing to have a purple belt come to their school and learn things and embrace it and make it a part of what they do. So let's rewind and talk about how that all occurred.
I've been fortunate to train with people that are open-minded, that are secure in themselves. And so Hapkido, if you look at pre-UFC, you could argue that it was probably, and I'm not saying maybe Korean Hapkido, I'm talking about Australian Hapkido, was probably a forerunner to MMA. Obviously, that's, people go, what a load of bullshit, But Hapkido had the striking, the kicking, the locking, the throwing, the takedown, some ground stuff. All right, the ground stuff was Hapkido ground stuff. It wasn't BJJ, but it had, so in order to be good at that, so for me and my understanding of it was, well, we need to make that better in our school. We need to make that bit better. So we're always trying to improve it. Hapkido is a contemporary martial art. It is traditional. And I think if you went to Korea from my school, you'd probably go, geez, Trav, what are you teaching? Like they do real Hapkido overseas. I'm only assuming this. And they would go, oh my God, it's a lot different to us. But we still fundamentally do everything. But I'm looking at kind of I guess everyone's looking at what works, what's working in today's life. Like I don't want to be stuck to something that worked 100 years ago. Things that work stay around. Good techniques stay. They weather the time, and so people don't have to reinvent those and come up with different systems. So Hapkido is very eclectic, and it's appealing to me because I can strike, kick, punch, fall, throw, takedown, and just call it Hapkido. Yeah. And so it's my stand-up MMA type of thing. Now, I'm not an MMA fighter. And so, like, I didn't jump onto that thing in the mid-90s or whatever, or now. Like, but I love the training drills and I love what they do. So that's important. If you have it, but it's really fascinating. Who's the top UFC referee in Australia? Steve Percival. He's a Hapkidoist from the 70s.
Wow, there you go.
Who's one of the top UFC fighters, Richie? He's a Hapkido guy as well. I think Brown, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I need to look that up. Sorry, I should have had that fact off the top. I watched it. He didn't win his last fight, but he's not going to say, "Oh, I do Hapkido only." No, because to fight successfully in MMA, you've got to do all the things now. You've got to mix. But Hapkido is a good general launching pad. Like it's just put it all in there, and that's kind of what I like about it.
Okay.
That's why I'm still doing it. Like if it didn't resonate with me, I wouldn't do it. I have to do. We've only got so much time, and where am I going to put that time? You've got to go. Okay, I can get bang for dollar. I can do an hour of this, and that's pretty good. Like that's my striking one or whatever. Yeah.
And so you get introduced to BJJ through this sort of, it's a very mixed martial arts approach to what's happening within the military, which is pretty cool, through John Will. And then you meet Danny Weir and you meet Mick Armstrong and you start training with them. And when do you realize that, hey, maybe I'm going to commit more time to this personally and really, really go out BJJ?
Well, I had this entity happening, this sort of Hapkido school. And, and then John blows me away with his instruction. And like I said, I'm like, wow, we need to do some of that.
Yeah.
We had a hole we don't have a hole in this spot. Yeah. Our ground work was sort of a bit Mickey Mouse, but not anymore, right? So it started to dawn on me about 4 years into the process, probably a bit slow, but I was still training myself and still doing things, but I hadn't actually said we're going to put it into the school. And the other thing is, I spoke to Steve and I spoke to a few people, and integrating, bringing in something, and then all of a sudden your other students are like, hang on, he's focused on that now. And you might bring in too much. Like I brought in too much and then I had to tailor it back. So now in Hapkido, we have, I think, a really good solid ground stuff. And I just call it Hapkido ground stuff, but its basis is BJJ, but it's all about, the self-defense aspect of it. So it's quite good. And then if the guys want to do BJJ, they come in and they've already learned all the basic hip movements and a few things, and it's not too different for them. So so you have to bring in this program. And is it just me? Am I the one that's fixated? Oh, I love this new thing. You know what I mean? Do others love it? They might not. Sometimes you bring something into a school and you think it's going to work and it just doesn't work. Like it seriously fails. So you have to really be careful how you blend things in. And I probably learned some lessons there as well. But now, right now as of 2020, we are a BJJ and Hapkido school, and they have different nights, and it blends together very well. And I've got students that do both, and some that do one, or some that do the other.
Yeah.
So back then, 2007, I think is when I went, right, we're going to do this.
Okay. And talk us through your belt progression from there.
Okay, so belt progression in BJJ.
In BJJ, yeah.
Yeah, belt progression in BJJ, I don't think you can compare, because if you're at a good school and you have the opportunity to maximize your training, then perhaps to get to blue belt might take you 2 years, you know?
Yeah.
But when you're back then, I had Danny Weir, who I was getting a weekly off, and Danny's awesome. And then we mix in with John when he came up to Canberra, and anyone else that came through. So I had at least 5 years on white belt, you know.
Wow.
Yeah. When you think of, but formally, I would say I trained really solidly for 2.5, 3 years.
Sure.
Then when it was starting off, it was a bit here, a bit there. But then I look at that and I go, yeah, that's about right for blue belt. But then Mike Armstrong, good friend of mine, coaches here, he had 8, 9 years on white belt.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm rolling Mike when he's done 5 years of white belt, and he's cleaning me up. And so he should, you know what I mean? It just makes sense.
Yeah.
The other day we graded a guy here, military guy from the US, 14 years on white belt. Wow. So, you know, for the listeners out there, your journey's so unique, and it's so, you know, so anyway, so let's say about 5 years really.
Yeah.
And then 2.5 years of solid. But from then, that was 2010. So see, 2010, I get a blue belt. So, and I exposed to John in 2004. Well, actually, that makes it 6 years. I prefer to say 5, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just that's a bit long. And then, and I'm also competing. The other thing is I love competition. It's probably, I will compete until I die, I think. I will, and you know that I like to compete. I like to roll and compete and do it. And I don't care if I lose. Other people probably do, but I don't. I just love getting out there and doing my bit. And so I enjoyed the fact, because I was getting slow. So I'd go in a karate comp, and the guys would clean me up. And I used to win these things. And so, but I wasn't training enough. I wasn't doing the speed stuff. There's a bit of stuff you got to do to be competitive in any sport. And I wasn't doing that in karate. I was just coming in from Hapkido and going, yeah, come on, I've done this for 30 years. I'll do it. And I got cleaned up.
Yeah.
And so I stopped. And then in BJJ, I was like, oh, hang on a second. I'm back in the game here. I can slow this down, especially in gi. I can now compete, you know, at a reasonable level, and I can enjoy myself. So I did that I did a lot of comps on white belt and blue, and then I got my purple belt in probably 2012, late 2012. And then I had a knee injury. So I don't really want to talk about my injuries, but because everyone that does sport has injuries. But I had a parachuting injury in the military, took me out for 6 months, and I basically broke my foot in half, and the doctor put it all back together, and I was just going off to commandos, and he's like, you're not going to run, mate. Your days of doing active stuff is over. And I'm like, no way. You know, that's not what a young fella wants to do. So, so I have to get over that injury, and, you know, I'm running. My first day in the unit, we're doing a 15 clicker, which is 15 kilometers with, you know, pack and webbing and all that stuff, quite heavy. And my foot was incredibly swollen. I had it in a bucket in the mess, which is the officer's mess. And the CO, who I didn't really want to see, like, I didn't want him to know that I'm injured. And like, it's like January, and this is the first thing we did, kind of thing. And he comes in and goes, oh, what's happening here? I said, oh, nothing, sir. And looks at my foot. And then he tells me a story about him where he parachuted with his guys and breaks both ankles. And he goes, I hobbled around the unit for a few months. So I was kind of like, oh, okay, cool. He gets it. So that was good. Fast forward, purple belt. I get injured my knee in a grading, actually, a Hapkido grading. And it's injury and self. I tied myself. You tie yourself to an identity. And I identified with being a martial artist. I identified with who I was. It was strong. To take that away, because I had a severe knee injury, 3 ligaments snapped, and surgery along, and then I got a blood clot. It was all just like a mess. I was on this, I called it, I couldn't get off the windmill, the hospital windmill, and I wanted to get off that thing. And I identify strongly with being a sportsman. And so to take that away from me, I was suffering. I don't want to say I was depressed, but I was quite, maybe I was. But the thing is, I understand when a sportsman leaves a sport such as AFL or tennis or this, and they lose that self-identity, it's like, yeah, it's hard because you know, like I've got other things that I do, but I identify with being that person that does that martial arts and runs this school.
Yeah.
So that got taken away from me. It took me a long time to get over those injuries. And I even had one student say to me from another school, he goes, "Oh, if that happened to me," because we were purple belts, he goes, "Oh, if that happened to me, I'd stop." I'm like, "I've got no choice, mate. I can't stop." Like I had to just, everyone saw my recovery in the school. I couldn't just disappear.
Yeah.
So eventually I went from a really stiff knee that had to be cranked open in surgery to get it to move a little bit to, you know, having to run classes. I had really good support from other instructors here while I couldn't run the classes. Then I was running the classes. I couldn't bend my knee. And, you know, we all know BJJ, it's on the ground. Your knee has to bend.
Yeah.
So it's been the best medicine for it. I have to bend my knee, that's for sure. So, and that took a dent to my confidence too as a competitor. By this stage, I'm calling, look, I probably started competing at 39 in BJJ, and I had my last comp last year. And obviously this year we don't have any comps at the moment. But I call myself a hack a little bit. I want to be better than what I am, but at the same time, the body is what the body is, and I carry a lot of injuries. So at that stage on purple belt, I'd lost confidence. And purple belt's not the belt you want to lose confidence on, because you give something to someone else in a competition, whether it's confidence or technique, you do something incorrect, a purple belt's going to punish you. A white belt won't punish you. A blue belt might punish you, but a purple belt and above, they're going to punish you. So if you've got this weakness, and so for me, I remember going in, it was actually John Will's comp, the gathering, couple on purple belt. And I remember getting back into the comp, I'd had a year or two off, and I was getting back into these things. And I said to the guy, and I shouldn't have said anything, I said, "Oh, look, mate, I've had really bad knee surgery. Please don't go near my knee." Which, and he did.
He went
and
for it.
well, I felt that he did. Maybe he didn't. And so it really, it psyched me out. I won the fight, and I get to the next round. I won the fight because I was like, "Oh, you bugger, you know, you're going for this knee." And then I sit off to the side, and I'm like, I'm in this real, I'm having a moment. I'm having a real physical and mental moment. I'm broken down, and do I go on? What's happening? Is my knee? I remember my wife Liz goes to me, "Well, if you injure yourself again, don't come home," sort of thing. You know? So I'm like, "Oh no." And anyway, I ring her, and she's funny. She goes, "What are you doing? Get back out there."
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, so I go back out to the final. I didn't tell the other guy, and he was good too, by the way, and we're quite friendly from my day on. But yeah, and I can't remember who won. He probably won. But the point was, I won. I overcame. And I'm in this stage, I'm late 40s, and I'm having a moment. So I think you can have a moment at any stage. And I know I'm a coach and I'm giving out coaching advice, but I had a moment that day as well. So yeah, so
absolutely.
Purple belt around 2013, 2012, whenever it was. Brown belt a few years later. A couple of years later, 2.5, 3 years later, and then black belt. That was last year. Got my black belt from John last year. Yeah.
All right. No, that's really cool. And I love the story you tell about your wife, Liz, because I'm sure there's so many BJJ guys and girls out there whose partners don't quite get it. And they're just like, you go to this thing and you just keep injuring yourself. Why do I keep supporting her? But it's so good.
Look, partners. Okay. So my wife, you go to somewhere and you hug other men, right? And so they become, we don't want our partners to be widows. So we like to get them to do it, but there's no way they're going to do it. Some of them, right? You want them supportive. So my tips for other people in my situation, you got to get family members, like especially your kids, because I'm going off to training with little Johnny.
Yeah.
And you're getting to do your thing, and you show them stuff at home, and you try and integrate it a little bit enough so that everyone knows, oh, okay, that's a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
Because as we all know, BJJ has really changed. I think it's changed over the last 10 years, even the last 5 years. And if you want to compete and be good, you've got to put more time into it, which takes time away from family. And there's a fine balancing line.
Big time.
And it's really interesting. It's a great topic about getting the most out of a class. And so deliberate training is really important, and squeezing that hour so that you can not waste too many hours at the school to achieve a result that you might not have achieved if you had have had it just the usual training program. So we've really got to be smart about our training. We've got to be time efficient, and we've got to appreciate that everyone's giving up their time to come to your school to train. So that's an incredible thing as well.
Yeah. No, that's great. Now, tell us about your black belt grading. So describe it to us. How was it? How was the feeling? Who was there?
Yeah. All right. So it's interesting. So I'll just talk about gradings in general for martial arts, because I've done a few of them. And so karate in Shotokan, Japanese style, closed house. No one watches. And it's kind of a bit of a beat up. You get smacked around a bit. Don't know if that still happens, but that's what happened to me. And it was fine because I was up for it, and I could dish it out as well. Hapkido, open, have a crowd, bring your family. It's it's a marketing thing. It's like, come and watch this. Do you want to be part of that? You can do that. And the guys are getting like it's a pretty tough test and all that sort of stuff. Then BJJ is an interesting thing because it takes so long to get a black belt. So those styles that are like that are probably 5-6 years, or maybe karate, you could probably get it in 4 years or whatever. Whereas BJJ is still 10 years. Because some people get it in 4, some people get it 8 years, whatever. It's all about how much time you're putting in and how good you are. So you are getting assessed and tested along the way. So just because you get a black belt, it's not really a black belt test as such. I mean, you've been tested, you've been put through the mill, and you've come out the other end, and you're being observed by, in my case, Danny Weir, John Will, Mike Armstrong. They've all watched that sort of thing. So I didn't have to do a physical test as such, but it was awarded to me, and I feel that my journey had got to that stage over a long period of time.
Yeah.
So it's a different system, and it's still got value too. We obviously run tests here, and so far we've run white to blue, blue to purple, and we'll be running purple to brown. And then I think we will just, we'll just do what others do, and that's award a black belt after that certain period of growth and development on brown.
Yeah. And how did it feel?
Oh, I was a surprise. So what happened was, so we have a seminar at the school here, and Danny and I work together, and we bring the guys over from the other schools, and they come up. And the weird thing about that night, I wasn't expecting it. Seriously. I was, because no one wants their black belt in BJJ, or they probably do, but it's like you think going from white to blue is hard enough. Oh, now I'm a target. I don't want to lose the white belt. Imagine now a black belt, and you got Richie, Tristan, everyone wanting to appreciate. Once you get accepted that they're going to get a piece of you, and that's life, then you're okay, right? Yeah. But so all of a sudden I get all these previous students turn up, like guys that got their blue belt with me, Andy Gibbs, Adam Potts. They turn up, and Potsy goes, I just thought I'd turn up and have a look. And look, Gibbo's from the coast. I'm like, yeah, fair enough. That makes sense. Then this crowd comes in, and previous students and students that are doing Hapkido. And I'm like, what are you guys doing here? Oh, we want to see what BJJ is. And I'm like, you know what BJJ is? It's been here for years. And so,
and you still hadn't caught on?
No, I hadn't caught on. And the other thing you got to realize is, for me, we're hosting John, so I want that to go well. And I'm trying to be a good host and make sure, I'm not thinking of myself. So I caught on when John started talking about it. I was like, oh, that's me. And then I was a bit embarrassed, but you know what? It was just, it's good. It's good to get, even as we slightly get older, it's good to get some milestones. It's good to get some acknowledgement, a pat on the back's good. It does. Praise and acknowledgement, a bit of recognition, that helps everyone.
Yeah.
We should be, I think as a society, it's not, we don't have to overpraise, but people, hey, you did a good job there, that's great. That all helps. Yeah.
I love it. That's such a cool story. All these people who don't normally come to these seminars. What are you doing here? Oh, what are you doing here?
It was really funny. And and I then got onto it and I thought, I'm a bit dumb.
So Travis, you are an active competitor. You love competing, but you also now run the ACT BJJ championships. So how did that all come about?
Okay, so it's been going, and this would have been our 6th year. So it's been going since 2015. I've still got it booked in for October, but I don't think it's going to happen this year. But what happened was we were developing a team. And it was actually for the kids. I had this really good, look, it's a little bit selfish. I run a kids program, but I've got my kids. And part of me being able to do what I want to do is I develop the program. And then my wife goes, oh, okay, they're going off to training. Yes. So, and I always thought, well, when my kids are through the program, do I still want to do the kids program? But the answer is yes, because now I'm training others to run that program.
Yeah. So
we had all these kids doing BJJ. We had adults as well. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be great? We have to travel to actually have a competition. There was still, Storm would run a comp and we'd go down there. And there was still a couple other smaller comps, which are great. I think you need all types of comps so that people get experience and not as much pressure. Because an ACT state championship, there's pressure. And so it was a real eye-opener for me. So I get in contact with the Australian Federation BJJ and organised this comp in 2015. But I didn't realise, because I'd been in comps, but I just didn't realise, I hadn't actually been on the receiving end of the intensity of coaches getting upset when their athlete's not winning. Yeah. And it was the referee's fault. And they come up to you, and I'm just the organiser. But actually my wife gave me some good ideas. The first one was, let's get the head ref is going to be a Brazilian or, ex-Brazilian, like Manol from Melbourne to come up. And that's perfect because he can then deal with all that stuff. Like, yeah, I don't have to worry about that. And then you get, nowadays, like BJJ comps are very professional. You pay the guys for their time. They come in, they know the rules, and they just deliver. So I initially wanted to do it for our kids, and the kids that came were phenomenal because parents aren't going to travel if the kids aren't that good. They might. But we got the best from New South Wales and Melbourne, and they came here and absolutely destroyed my kids. Because my kids were like, oh, it's their first comp. These kids are like, they're going for points. They're going to be the national champion. Yeah. So so the first year, not so good. But you know what? We last year, the kids came second or third, and my adults team won the overall prize. So we took some hits, as in, should are we any good at this? The doubt as coaches to, oh no, we're okay. And now we've got experience, and now we've got guys that know what they're doing. Yeah. But to take a kid who's just learning some moves in BJJ, to give them the confidence and the competence to actually compete, it's a big step up. And then they have to deal with losing. And you watch kids' comps, and a lot of the times they cry, and you don't know whether they've cried because they've been injured or cried because they've lost. I think most of the time it's because they've lost, and no one likes to lose. And you can lose people from BJJ if they're having these bad experiences. So it's just, so for my kids, and I even have to say, like, to Harry, my oldest, who's 17 now, he was competing since he was 5, and my youngest, Raf, who competed at the same age. Yeah. I just say to him at the start, look, so in Harry's case, I've watched him do lots of things. I just go, no, you get out there and do your thing, mate. I'm not invested in it as a parent. I'm not hanging there criticizing anyone. I'm just watching it. I just look over and watch his fight and go, oh, he got tapped. Oh, no, he tapped. You know what I mean? I'm not, I've cut the apron strings on that. I'm just letting go. Younger kids, though, as parents, we have difficulty doing that. So little Johnny's out there, or Rafi goes out to compete, and if it's you're kind of competing for them. You're the moves. You're coaching and you're doing this. That's not healthy. I don't think it's that healthy, but everyone does it. But I actually as I said to Rafferty, well, the start of this year, but obviously we haven't got to compete, is Raf, you go in the comp, like me, the result's the result. We get in the car, we go and have a burger and a milkshake afterwards, and we have a laugh. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it's about. And so, but he can still get upset because he likes to win too. But yeah, so it was, that first comp was all about the kids, and then it became all about everyone. And now I actually feel it's all about the community in Canberra now. I like to get, so I got the schools involved. So I got other schools involved to run mats, and that they can get some money from the entries and for their school. And for this year, I was thinking if we were to do it, I was thinking about some sort of community event to help us all get back on the mat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it would probably only be for ACT at this stage because the Victorians, I don't think they're coming up. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe it changes in the next month or so. But,
yeah. Well, we'll see. And you talked about kids. Now, your Australian self-defense, Hapkido and BJJ programs are big, quite popular. A lot of kids are going there. A lot of kids have been going there for a very long time now.
Yes.
How do you develop a successful kids program in martial arts?
Yeah, look, I can't take the credit, actually. I can take some credit, but not all of it. So my wife she's a very good instructor, as in teacher.
Yeah.
So she would look at something, and she's my biggest critique, and she would look at something and go, you did that wrong. I wouldn't always like it, by the way, but she critiqued. And so I get her involved to look at things, come in and have a look, and she can pick 10 different things and go, that's got to be improved. That's not working because of this, this, and this. But she's developed an eye for it. But the program, what we try and do is build a holistic program. So we've got on and off the mat characteristics, life principles, things that they can relate to off the mat. Because the success of John Will as an instructor is it's about, you can't just do it on the mat because you don't always spend your time here. Things in life have to relate to outside. Yeah. So he's done that. He always does that in his seminars, and we do it in our programs, and we've always done it. So we want that engagement. We want the kids to have a structure and have progression. And then each class, they've got to have fun. It's got to be well organized. And the other thing, this is the other thing, I taught the kids programs for many years. And if I can bring other younger versions, not of me, their own unique version, if they come through and they're running it, it's really cool. Like it replicates the system, and it just means that they're learning to be better. They're becoming the mentors, the future mentors. They're becoming the instructors. So to answer your question, I've always had in the back of my mind that we have a massive responsibility. I don't do a kids class as babysitting. I've never done that. I think there's a tendency for that out there a little bit. My classes aren't that. My instructors are held accountable. The students that come in, I'm saying to the parents, hold us accountable. Little Johnny or little Jill, they have to learn. They have to go away and understand that. And, sometimes we've been found wanting. I had one friend say, I didn't think you were delivering. And they left. And they were friends. I said, what? Yeah. And I really had to look at what we're doing. And I understood there was a breakdown in communication, and so I fixed it. But yeah, it is a good program. It's solid, but it does take a lot of effort, and I've got a team around me to deliver.
Yeah. And look, Trav, you have been now teaching martial arts for such a long time, in and out of the military, and you've got your well-established school. For people out there who have this passion, do you have any advice from them how you made this passion of yours become a business? Because you never went full-time into it, but it's a successful business that you also had off to the side of your professional career as well. So what would be your advice for those that want to turn their martial arts passion into a business?
Yeah, don't do it.
Well, that's the end of the show. No.
Look, it's a dangerous thing turning a passion into a business, because all of a sudden you've got the business requirements. The rent has to be paid. The lights have to be kept on. You need students and a whole lot of things. So I came from community martial arts. I want to separate this, because community martial arts was twice a week, 3 times a week in a community hall with an instructor. That's what my first instructor, John McIntosh, does. That's what Alfonso in Brisbane does. That's what John Hotitis does. I came across professional martial arts in Sydney, where people were making their livelihood from it, from schools. Yeah. And so I was like, wow, you can actually be full-time at that? That's kind of interesting for me. But I'm in the military and I'm enjoying my military career, and I've stacked and racked. I have, different streams of things happening because I think that's what you've got to do. So you have to make it, if you're someone who's like, one day I want to own my own school, you have to look at the model that you want. Yeah. So there's a number of models out there. There is I'm the guru, I'll run all the classes. Yes, that's a model. That will burn you out within 10 years and you may be divorced, right? Because you have to do all the work. That can work for some people, and maybe that's fine. Maybe they're happy with 3 or 4 marriages in their life, and maybe that's okay. I mean, whatever happens, happens. But that model will burn you out. Yeah, sure, you are the entity. You don't give off. You don't develop anything over here. You don't develop other people. They all come to you. That you won't leverage as much, or maybe you've got an internet presence and maybe you can. So that's model number 1. You can stick with the community model, hire halls, do that, and that's okay, but you'll still have to have a job on the side, right? Because that model probably won't pay. It'll probably give you a trip overseas once a year and maybe pay a few bills.
Yeah.
The model that I chose was, well, I want to have a military career, and I've got another career in another space happening. And I'm really happy for that, because this pandemic has just showed me, look, they labeled martial arts as non-essential. So, we just go, well, we think it's essential. So something off to the side. So the model that we have in this school is, if I can develop mentors along the way, and this one takes time. This one, you've got to seed and wait about 10. You put the seed in, and probably 5 or 6 years later, you're getting a return, if you want to say a return, right? So I like to develop instructors. But when you develop instructors, you pass off something. You give up some, I'm calling it entity, could be wrong. Entity is me, Trav Faure, the martial artist. But if I'm developing, say, my son Harry, then I have to allow him to develop his entity and be him, the man Harry. And so he's running his class. He runs his class, right? I can give him feedback and I can do all that, but he's developing his relationships with the next generation. So that model, you need to select good people. They need to be able to instruct, or maybe you're training them to instruct, but they need to give off energy. That's the other thing. So the people you select have to give off energy. If there's someone that doesn't really want to train, they're not going to be a good instructor, because they're not going to do the things you need to do. So that's my model. The next model that I kind of like, and I've encouraged others to do a little bit too, is, well, perhaps work out the major expenses. The major expenses are your building, your lease, or your mortgage. Really, in BJJ, do you need all that room? If it's about your ego and having 40 students, you do that for a time, ego tick. But if it's about doing something perhaps you can do in your own premise, your own home, your own garage, have a few students. You don't have to have too many. Sure. All right. So here's the scoop. Are you professional? Are you making money from it? Probably not, but you won't have the hassle, the overhead of every other worry that you've got. Yeah. So you can be, so all right. So if you wanted to be full-time, you probably got to run a school, probably have a bit of both, probably have an internet presence, probably, and do some seminars and all the rest of it. So there's quite a few different streams of revenue that you've got to tie together to actually eke out a living, So so for me, the school runs the school. It does its job, and I work elsewhere, and to bring home the money for the family, so to speak.
Yeah. And we're sort of at the end now, Trav. So where to from here?
Are we at the end?
We're close. We're close.
Really? How 93 minutes?
We'll get there. We're going to get there. So where to from here? Where to from here for your BJJ? Where to from here for your school?
Awesome. What we're trying this year, and we're really ramping this up, is we haven't had a split class yet, an advanced class. We probably could have in the past, but we've brought it in this year. So we've now got an advanced class for BJJ, and we've got a fundamentals class, which some schools open up and they go fundamentals and advanced, and they've got 2 people in their advanced. But as we've found, we've got enough advanced people to have an advanced class, which is really going to rapidly progress those advanced students with advanced concepts, and they're going to train together and benefit from all the benefits of just having advanced students train together. So that's really key for the development of this school. For Hapkido, is that I often reinvent Hapkido in the school. We haven't really reinvented for about 5 or 6 years, but I want to take another look at standing sequences. So I want to go for combinations that end up with ground domination. I was developing that over the last year, but I actually want to sort of make that more concrete. That's kind of like heading down an MMA role, but we're not fighting. We're just doing sequences. So that's where I want to go a bit with that. As far as the school, as far as, just keep the development of the kids coming through, identify the instructors, students that will make good instructors, and give them the opportunity to grow and develop. And hopefully, keep running the competition, the ACT championships, and just growing that comp. That'll be a lot of fun.
Awesome. And what about yourself?
Well, I don't want to say this, mate, but I'm like, obviously, my year, 2020, when I woke up on January 1st, was bushfires. No, let's say before then.
Yeah. It's not a great year for it.
I was like, I want to, go into the Masters, go do some Masters competitions and maybe head overseas and, have a look at that and just have a bit of fun. But that'll have to wait to 2021. So I'm just really, actually, all right. So what has lockdown taught me? So lockdown has taught me a few things about myself. And the first one is I was developing a hip injury, and I thought, because I've been watching people that have had hip injuries, John Danaher in America and that, and I'm thinking, gosh, am I going to have to get my hip replaced? It was really sore for about 2 years. And I was like, what is going on? And I ended up, I just ended up doing this aggressive stretching program during lockdown. And the weird thing is my hip injury has gone away. So it must have been some sort of muscle spasm thing that, I don't know. So I've really improved my own agility. And now I want to, so for me personally, I want to improve my instructing, and I want to improve my own technique, and I want to compete more and keep healthy. I think as we age, it's easy to remember a past where you were fit, but as we age, we need to, go over and lift the dumbbells a few times and, do some heaves and do some push-ups and just keep the body moving. Because the young guys in your school, this is the other thing too, is I am trying to beat the 93 minutes here.
You're past it. You're past
it.
it.
Awesome. No, I want to just say this. People, it's interesting because if you're rolling people, and we roll competitively here, and, I'll get tapped. I get people mount me, and I try and get out and all the rest of it. But I don't stop, because I think if you stop, you're losing a part of the game. And you can say age, and all of a sudden I'm going to hit an older age and I'm not doing those things. So while I still can do all those things, I'm doing it. I'm keeping myself fit. I'm rolling the students, and I'm having fun. And I'm accepting that I'm going to get the better of, someone's going to get the better of me, and I'm happy for them. Well done. You deserve that. You got that on me.
That's great.
Doesn't make me any, people worry about, they won't respect. They respect you. Richie, you roll someone who you've known for a long time, and you get mount, and you're kind of happy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like if I remember sparring John McIntosh, my first instructor. I did it 2 years ago. I went back to Hamilton, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of weird. John's in his 70s and I'm 52, and I was 14, 13, and we used to spar him. He was probably in his 40s. And so I'm sparring this guy, and I'm loving it. And like, I might have cleaned him up maybe, or maybe he was doing some stuff, but that was irrelevant. It was just a lot of fun. And that's the way I want the ground to be for me into the future.
What a great way to finish up, Trav. That's such a cool story. I got to just really say thank you, Trav, so much for all of that. You've really exposed all, and you've really told us such an amazing story of really, truly a lifetime of martial arts. You know what I mean? And you can imagine if there was no such thing as martial arts, your life wouldn't have gone in the way it has gone. It's been, you know, that partner with you the entire time. And so many people are better for having gone through that journey with you. So thank you for sharing that story. The thing I think I'll never forget is a young Travis Faure shooting a tank randomly off into some sort of direction. That's I don't think there's many people in the world that have that story. That's pretty cool as well. So no, listeners, I hope that you have enjoyed this episode of Behind the Black Belt with Travis Faure. And if you are ever in Canberra and looking for somewhere to train, then check out Redback BJJ. You can find out all you need at www.redbackbjj.com.au. And if you're interested also in Hapkido, the school, combining them all together, you can check out Travis's other larger school website about Australian self-defense. Now that is at www.australianselfdefense.com.au. Find out about the Hapkido and especially this extremely successful kids program that they have running there as well. And you can find them both on Facebook very easily. And Trav, again, thank you so much for being with us. It has been an absolute pleasure for myself. Have you got any final words before we wrap up?
No, whatever you do, we're given one life, and make it count. Like, you can spend time doing whatever, but you know, if you develop a passion, and that will, you know, and do it for your life and enjoy it.
That's fantastic. So well said. That's it, folks. And until next time, this is Rich signing off for Behind the Black Belt.
Behind the Black Belt is proud to support veteran grappling. Veteran grappling is using the grappling arts to improve the lives of military veterans and first responders. Visit www.veterangrappling.com to learn about scholarship opportunities and more.
Join our community on Facebook and our website at www.behindtheblackbelt.com. Behind the Black Belt is a TDP Studios production. Behind the Black Belt is copyright of Richard Thapthing Thong and TDP Studios. The music used in this episode is Rocking Forward by X Take Rux and is used under an Attribution International 4.0 license.